Welcome to another photo mishmash. This is episode 8. I'm Toby.
And I'm Christina.
And tonight we're going to do things a little bit differently. No news, no discussion segment. It's really all just...
reader questions. Or not reader questions. Viewer questions.
Viewer questions. Yeah. And our answers.
That's right.
Right. And you know, somebody pointed out the other night that it's important to note that what we share is our opinion.
Yes. Yeah. Just our opinion.
And sometimes I start to write that. In my opinion, this is the best lens you could buy for what you're using. Or I start to say that. But then I kind of hope and think that it's redundant. You're hearing it from me. It must be my opinion.
Right.
But, you know, I think it's, especially as we go through a lot of these questions that cover a variety of topics, these are our opinion from our experience. It's not saying it's the best, or it's the best for everybody, or it's how everybody else should do things.
It's not the final word on any matter, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just our opinion, what we think.
Yeah. Okay.
Take it with a grain of salt,
right.
I guess.
But before we get into the questions, the viewer questions, we should remind folks
about
the exciting thing.
Oh, our giveaway.
Giveaway!
Our giveaway!
You're going to pick it up?
So,
okay.
We announced this giveaway from our friends at Artifact Uprising last week, or last podcast. So, yeah, so it's this awesome wood block. It's, each wood block is one of a kind, and it holds up to 12 of your images. They print them for you and mail them to you with this block. And it's just a really cool gift, or just really nice for you to display on your desk at work or at home, or just, you know, at anywhere really. It's just really awesome. So yeah, enter the giveaway. The details are down below. The details are down below. Yeah, you could win one of these. Pretty cool.
It's very cool. It's very nice. Thank you, Artifact Uprising.
Yes.
The print style is very cool, kind of the Polaroid look.
Yeah.
And it's just really nice to see your work in print. So often we take a bajillion photos, and they go on Facebook, they go on Google, they go on SmugMug, they go on Zenfolio, they go on Picasa Web Gallery. That's the same as Google+.
They just sit on hard drives, basically.
Yeah. And it's a lot different to when somebody walks into your house and there are these prints in front of them that are very neat. And especially a piece like this that is both an art piece itself and a fun way to see your prints. So yeah, we highly recommend printing your prints either through things like this, books, which Artifact Uprising does as well, prints on the wall. We actually have a question about the one behind me tonight, not why is it always crooked. That I do recognize that it almost always ends up to be slightly crooked and very annoying. We've had good tips on how to fix it, just haven't done it yet. Yeah, so anyway, should we get into questions?
Let's get to it.
Great. First question from Paul Dove. He says, great podcast, guys. Well, thank you, Paul. A question, not really, I don't need to read the extra part. What type of gear did we start out with way back in the day? Has it been digital only, or was there film in the mix? And what were you shooting with? And do you still own the gear today?
You go first.
Oh, I go first? Okay,
Sure.
I did start with a film SLR in college, as I was starting to collect images for science teaching, because that's what I wanted to be at first. And I shot both a mix of film and slide. Wasn't doing any professional work back then at all. And took that on travels and trips, and had kind of the basic lenses for it. I honestly don't remember all of the lenses I had for it, because I went through a long drought where digital cameras came out. I wasn't using that at all, so I sold off pretty much all of the pieces of it and the camera itself eventually. And then shot with digital point and shoots for many, many years, just, you know, collecting images, again, not professionally at all. And one of the things I think is funny about how I transitioned with point and shoots over the years is how careful I was with the first digital point and shoots I got. I kept them in a Pelican case, one of those locked waterproof, and you know, I only got it out when the occasion was special and the sky was blue and there was no sign of any bad weather. And then as they progressed on and on and on, and eventually, you know, I've cameras that are just get thrown in the back seat of the car and get banged around and things like that. So I think that's interesting. But then, moved into the Rebel XT was my first Canon DSLR. And that was about 9 years ago now. Wow. 9 years ago. And I bought it. I was one of those, back then the kit lens wasn't great. And you still hear that today, but it's not as true with the Canon STM kit lenses. I bought it with the Sigma 18-50 f2.8 lens and the Canon 50mm f1.8. Now, coming from point and shoot, I thought I was going to be great. It was going to make amazing pictures right away. And for a while, I was really unhappy with the quality of the pictures I was making. Especially using the 50-1.8, because honestly, I'd forgotten so much from my film days. I wasn't following any of the rules, like your focal length and shutter speed rule, and I was coming out with soft pictures or blurry pictures, or I was shooting at f1.8, not being careful about where I was focusing. So there was a learning curve there for a while. I still have the Sigma 18-50 f2.8. I don't use it very often, but it was a good lens for the money. I should pass it on at some point. And I don't shoot at all with film anymore. All digital. Yeah. Your turn.
Okay. So I started with a Fine Pix camera. So just a little point and shoot. That's what I had. My first camera ever was a little Fine Pix point and shoot. And then like Toby, I got the XT, Rebel XT.
Copycat.
And that was the camera that I used to kind of transition into more professional work, although I mostly just did it for fun, like really low paid sort of gigs. And then when I started shooting weddings, I decided that I needed to have more professional kind of workhorse camera, so I didn't sell my XT. I just kept it and then actually lent it to a friend who still shoots with it now. But I got a 7D, yes. I got a 7D. That was a few years ago, I think, when it had first come out. And then I sold that to buy the 5D Mark II. And now I still have that, plus the 5D Mark III, so that's what I shoot with now. But back then, Rebel XT, gun 7D. Yep.
Good. What lens did you have when you first started with the Canon XT?
I had the kit lens for a while, and then I got the 50-1.8, and I had a lot of fun with that lens for a very long time. And then I received the Tamron 28-75 as a gift, and I actually didn't enjoy shooting with that lens that much until I got my 5D Mark II for some reason. I think that the photos with that lens paired with the 5D Mark II had just better results than any other cameras that I shot with before. But yeah, the 50-1.8 I think was probably the lens that kind of propelled me into really wanting to get more creative and wanting to do photography more seriously. So.
Yeah. And then do you want to talk a little bit about the contacts?
Yeah, so I recently, to kind of try to achieve the look of film, I decided to get a medium format camera and incorporate that into some of my paid work. And so I've been having fun shooting with it, but it's really hard to kind of go from being all digital to shooting film, because it's just so different, just from, not being able to see the images right away to having to wait a really long time to even get them back, and then just working on a style and an editing sort of workflow that works with whatever lab you send it to, and it's also really, really expensive. So I'm just keeping it right now as to kind of use it as a hobby when I want to see things differently, but I don't think that I will be incorporating it into my paid work. It's just not practical or sustainable, in my opinion.
This reminds me of a question that I got last week that I didn't incorporate into this list about medium format versus full frame versus crop why somebody would choose to shoot with one versus another. I think we have a question kind of like that in the mix. But do you want to talk briefly about why somebody would choose to shoot with a medium format?
There's a lot of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of people just really like film. Like, they love the whole process of film.
Or even digital medium format.
Oh, digital medium format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've never really shot with digital medium format, and I don't feel like I can really speak about it that much. I mean, there are... I think the biggest reason is, one, the dynamic range is much larger than, like, some of the pro level Canon DSLRs, and also you can, like, blow images up really, really big. So, and that's why, you know, they're used to take images that will be turned into billboards, basically.
Yep.
So,
you're starting with a larger sensor, so then you can make file sizes or image sizes that are larger.
Yeah.
But just like that line is blurring between crop and full frame now, I mean, the very high-end crop cameras, the 70D, the D7100, are very, very good and not a huge distance from the full frame cameras as far as low light performance and dynamic range. And it's very similar with the full frame versus medium format. There's not that huge gap anymore between low light performance and file size. Look at something like the Nikon D800E, you know, with the anti-aliasing filter array.
And you could make the argument that actually that camera performs better in low light than a lot of medium format cameras.
Sure. Yeah. And offers just as much dynamic range. I mean, I know a professional photographer, published professional photographer, that has sold all of his medium format gear and quite happily bought the D800, which is definitely a smaller sensor, but much more portable, much more affordable lens selection. So, yeah, you know, that line is blurring, but still, medium formats are often used in product advertising where you're going to make billboards, magazine spreads.
You know, now that you bring up the lens selection, that is probably a huge reason also to shoot medium format, because you have that, you know, the really high-end size lenses, and paired with, you know, a really nice sensor, you can get some really, really crisp, great images. So, anyway, but moving on.
Good. All right. Good question. Thank you, Paul. Ali, Shadpur. Sorry, Ali. I don't know if I said that totally correctly. What do you think about using a graduated ND filter, neutral density filter, to change the exposure, and can it be as smooth as the pro lenses to change the amount of light coming into the camera? If that's a good solution, which brand do you recommend?
What does she mean by pro lenses?
It's a he.
I'm sorry, what does he mean by pro lenses?
I'm not totally sure there, but let me say what I think. Basically, and I've talked about this before, when shooting video, you don't have control. Oh, and Ali actually, I said part of this, and I cut part of this question out. You know, you don't have aperture control while you're shooting on the Nikon side. You do on the Canon side. So if you're filming video and you need to adjust for changing light levels, on the Canon you can adjust your aperture, on the Nikon you can't. So how can you smoothly adjust? Now I will say this, even though you can on the Canon, you shouldn't really do it while filming, because it is noticeable, because you are literally clicking that aperture closer, or more open, smaller or more open. But you can do it, and on the Nikon Canon you can't. So one of the ways to control the amount of light coming into the camera is to use something like a graduated neutral density filter, or actually I should say a variable neutral density filter. That's what we want to be saying.
Yeah.
Which is a filter that you can twist, and as you twist, it's basically like cranking up the level of sunglasses that the lens is wearing. The more you turn, the darker, the less light it's letting through.
Yep.
And people do use that. I've used that before when I've shot weddings with Steve. Moving out into a brightly lit area, as you walk out, you can crank that and keep your light levels fairly constant. It's tricky to do, but with practice you can do it, and you can do a pretty good job of it. So they work very well. I can't remember the good brand off my top of my head. Hoya is consistently a good brand for all of these filters, but there's another one for the variable neutral density filter. Look for a link down below, or maybe I'll go look it up when I edit this video and I'll put a little blurb. I feel like it starts with a Z, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. So yes, that is a way. And they're also nice to use for photography, for taking those longer exposures when the light levels are bright. But I tell you what, the good variable neutral density filters are not cheap.
No, they're very expensive. At least $400. $400 plus.
Well, the very good ones. You can get somewhere between $100 and $200 for just the kind of good level, entry level ones. But that's a lot of money to spend on a filter. For photographers who aren't worried about video, I think you should get the non-variable kind and just get a certain level like the 0.9, which is going to block out a lot of light. And they're more affordable.
Right.
Or you can just use a circular polarizer, which I've used.
It works more or less.
It works more or
There
less.
are some times that I've wished I had a neutral density filter and I've had to settle for the circular polarizer, and it's not the same, but it works.
Okay, great. Thank you, Allie. Emmanuel Para is going to do some traveling in Mexico in a few months and wants to know what types of lenses would be good to take some photographs and video footage while you're out there. He'd also like to hear more about the business photography subject. We will talk more about that in future discussions. Let's stick to the question.
Yeah.
So, this is one of those kind of open-ended questions. What kind of lenses are good for photos and videos? Well, I've got my recommended lens videos that are up there. But basically, I think it's nice to travel with a fairly convenient lens and then a prime lens. And those two things really kind of cover your bases. The convenient lens for everyday walking around, the prime lens when you want to take the slightly more artistic shot where you're isolating your subject, or when you want to travel lighter when you go out in the evenings. It really depends. Vacation means many different things to many people. Some people want to really go light and relax. Some people want to take a million photographs and are happy carrying around lots of gear. Sometimes I go back and forth about it, actually. I mean, you all saw my this table here packed with stuff that was traveling light for the coastal California trip. But if you want to shoot photo and video, you probably, and you don't want to set up on tripods and stuff, you probably want to have a lens with image stabilization to give you slightly smoother looking video. Yeah. And that's also friendly as a walk-around lens, so you don't have to worry about necessarily stabilizing with a tripod or something for longer handheld shots and darkened, building interiors and lower light levels and things like that.
So would you say the Tamron 24-70 with IS or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not crazy about that lens though.
There's just not that many lenses that are flexible that also have IS.
No, but I think the kit lens on the Canon side, the 18-135.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, and the Nikon 18-140, and then throw a prime in there. Canon 40, Canon 50, Nikon 35, Nikon 50.
I like the Nikon 35 a lot. Yeah. It's a nice lens.
It is a nice lens. It's a really nice lens for the money. I do wish Canon had a slightly better 35 that wasn't an f2 and wasn't as old as dirt. Yeah. It's still a decent lens, but it's just its value level isn't that high. Yeah. And then the Sigma 17-70 with IS or OS as they call it. That's a good lens too, and that covers a nice range. So those are some lens suggestions. But if you wanting to capture wildlife,
then you should bring a zoom lens. So prioritize. What kind of activities will you be doing? Will you be doing, will you be on the hunt for, wildlife that you want to capture, or will you just kind of be walking around exploring? So, in the first case, you probably want a zoom lens and then a prime. In the second case, you probably want something a little bit more of a wide angle so you have more flexibility. I think, in the end, you're probably going to be better off with something that's wider that doesn't get you as close, because you might be bummed to miss a shot, of a creature that's really cool, but you'll be very limited if, your choice of lens is a zoom lens and you can only bring a zoom lens. Just especially if you have a crop sensor camera. Because when you're indoors or you're having dinner with somebody, or you're going to have to back up a lot to be able to get, you know, a wider shot. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that was about 4 cents. Thank you, Emmanuel. I think I already said that. Baby Bell Love has a question specifically for you.
All right.
And she says it's kind of random, but it's not really. In the behind the scenes of the styled shoot, it appears you're petite. This is where I should Photoshop in you looking like gigantic, being super tall or something. So I'm not sure if that's an accurate observation or not. If so, do you have any issues with being petite? I'm 5'1" myself, and sometimes I feel like if I was a little taller, I might get a better shot. Maybe it's my own issue, but if it's something you've had to take into consideration and have made adjustments for, I'd love to know.
Well, Baby Bell Love, thanks for your question. I'm actually 5'1" also, so yes.
So short.
I am pretty petite. And I would say that there have been times where I've been kind of bummed to not be able to shoot over somebody's shoulder and, you know, felt like I couldn't have gotten the best shot possible. But for the most part, I felt like it's kind of been to my advantage. And, you know, I feel like from my height, there are a lot of shots that other people who are taller can't really get. And so you can, in a way, you can sort of get a certain intimacy from that perspective. You know, when you're photographing, for example, for me, for weddings, when I'm photographing the bride, and just being at, you know, at their level or like a little bit lower, there's a certain kind of level of intimacy that you can achieve from shooting from a little bit of a lower angle. So I also sometimes wear, you know, a little bit of a heel, which gives me like a couple of inches, so not that much, but it helps a little bit. For the most part, though, I mean, one of the things that I do is I acknowledge when I'm working with clients, I acknowledge my height and the fact that I am short and that I will have to sort of make adjustments based on that, like stand on something or you know, make people lean forward just a little bit so that I appear taller from my viewpoint. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of, you know, try to take it as more of an advantage. You know, it lets me
That's such a positive outlook.
Yeah, it just lets me be a little bit more, I don't know, inconspicuous and just, yeah, I don't know.
I do lose track of her on the dance floor sometimes in wedding receptions.
Yeah. So, and I do a lot of this.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited for the next version of the 5D Mark III whenever it comes out, because I think it's going to have the same kind of live view capabilities that the 70D does. And there are a lot of people that kind of poo-pooed using the back of the camera, not the viewfinder, to take pictures because it is slower. But it's nice even for me, being fairly average male height, to sometimes get even a higher perspective by holding the camera up and being able to see what's on the back and to focus. Is nice.
Yeah.
And you also bring a step stool.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just for working with big groups, and anybody that's working with large groups should have a step stool, whether they're 5'1" or 5'9".
What if they're a basketball player?
They're probably all right. But
I wonder if there are any basketball players. I wonder if never mind.
Yeah, never mind.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, it can be challenging sometimes, but for the most part, it's not something that I struggle with a lot. Yeah, so just try to make the best of it. Wear some heels sometimes if you feel like you need to. Stand on stuff, and yeah, hopefully that helps.
Great. Thanks, Baby Bell Love. Freddy Cougar.
Freddy Cougar?
Freddy Cougar. Is that
That's a funny name. Well, Freddy Krueger is the name.
Right, okay. It's not Krueger. Freddy Cougar.
It's not Krueger.
They'd like to know how I did this photo on the wall with a blurred / moving background. So maybe I should just move this out of the way a little bit so you can kind of see. Oh, this is going to be bad.
Yeah. Why don't you just find the photo and then link to it? Because you can't even really see it that well even when you bring that down.
Perfect.
Okay.
So, a shot like this is your panning shot, and I have plans to do a video that covers this in detail sometime in the near future. But basically, what you want to do is you want to track the subject that's moving with a slightly slower shutter speed than you would normally handhold and fire off a burst of images and hope in one of them the subject is sharp and the background is smooth. In this case, I think I was shooting at about 1/20th or 1/30th of a second. The faster the object, obviously, the faster your shutter speed can still be, and the faster you're going to pan. You know, it is something that takes practice. I've tried to do good ones, lots and lots. This is one of the better ones I've done. I've had a couple others. I had a car one that I took with the Sony a year or two ago that worked out well. But basically, you just move like that, and it really doesn't matter what lens or aperture you're using because the background is all going to be blurred through motion. You just really want to pick that shutter speed that's going to allow you to get a blurred background. And it depends on the speed of the object.
Yep.
1/10 of a second is probably the absolute, would be for somebody walking. 1/20th for biking slowly like this picture. 1/30th, 1/40th for biking faster. 50, 60 for a car.
Yeah. Mostly patience. Just kind of play around with your settings and see what works.
Yep. Thank you, Freddie. All right. Lee had a good question. Oh, had a question about props. Do we use props in any of our photography? And giving images that extra oomph. So I think this is maybe more, Lee, you want to see topics covering this in the future, but I thought I highlighted giving it the, let's just cover that giving the, because we don't really use props in shots.
We only use props when they're meaningful to the couple. Like, for example,
if the couple has asked us to. Yeah.
Right. Like that engagement session, we did an engagement session recently in the winter where the couple brought a blanket that was really meaningful to the bride because it had been in her family for a really long time, and so it was special to her. So we used the blanket for pictures. And there was a toboggan also that they brought along, which, you know, was significant because there was actually snow on the ground, but also it had been a childhood toy that she played with, you know, years ago. So it was meaningful. So in that sense, we do use props, but it's not like we bring props to any shoot and accessorize our clients with them, especially if they don't have any meaning to them, because then you just have some random objects on there. So, but it's nice when couples bring props that are meaningful to them, because then it just gives the shoot more personality. So yeah.
Okay.
So, and the images and the oomph. Okay. I think that you can create oomph by just composing a really, really good, well-balanced image. You can create oomph by like sharpening an image or increasing contrast or correcting the white balance. And I think, excuse me, the oomph, I don't know, I sort of interpret it as like, how do you make a picture look a little bit more professional? And so, I mean, it's subjective, but
I think it's subjective, but I think it's post-processing for the most part. I think many people don't realize that 98% of the images that they see on the internet that they like, that are good images, have been post-processed. Maybe not a huge amount. I'm not talking about gigantic changes, but a little bit of sharpening, a little bit of contrast, and maybe a touch of vibrance or saturation.
Right.
You know, very rarely do you get an image straight out of the camera. It might make you excited, you like it because the composition, you recognize it, but when you look at it on the screen, you know, it often doesn't have the vibrance of reality, of being there.
Right.
And a little post-processing puts that back in. And in Lightroom, a little bit of clarity, a little bit of contrast, and a little bit of vibrance or saturation. Vibrance is a little better to use. Would you say? Yeah.
Vibrance is good for skin tones, and saturation is good for
vibrance was
and blues and
Vibrance was good because it didn't mess with skin tones, but it brought up the punch of the colors.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. And saturation just increases the
overall
tones.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, and we'll talk more about that. And I'd love to have you do some videos of your Lightroom editing, especially skin tones. But yeah, making sure the first step, of course, I think, is making sure your white balance is set, or the white balance is accurate, either in post or pre being when you take the picture. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Lee. Jeff Martins has a question about cards. I believe he means SD cards, compact flash cards, the cards you're saving your images onto. Will the quality of the card affect the sharpness of the photo? And will the quality affect video playback? Jeff has had some issues with stop-and-go playback, not sure if it's something he's doing or the quality of the cards. And how many times can you reuse a card?
I don't know how many times you can reuse a card before it doesn't work anymore.
10,001.
He's making that up. We don't know.
They have lifespans of about like 10,000 read writes is what it's supposed to be.
All right.
Maybe 100,000.
Right.
Somewhere in that range.
But it's sort of an arbitrary number, I think. That's just, I feel like these companies have to give you some sort of information about the life of the cards, but we don't really know. No, you can't. Your image, the sharpness of your image is not going to be changed based on the card that you use. You can use a really, really cheap card or a really, really expensive card, and the sharpness of the actual image is going to be the same. It should be the same.
Yeah, it's just storing zeros and ones.
Yeah, and the read speed might be different. It might record a little bit slower if you're using a cheaper card, much faster. The playback issue might be related to a card if you use a cheaper card. Yes,
very much so. Cheaper, and we gotta be careful though. Not necessarily. There are cheap cards that are very good values. There are more expensive cards that are still slow.
Sure.
The SanDisk Ultra sitting back there, it's a piece of crap. It's slow. I have more problems with that than others. All of the other SanDisk cards are wonderful. I haven't had any issues with them, but that Ultra model, or it's not brand, SanDisk is the brand, Ultra is the model. Anyway, so yes, but let's say a slow card is certainly going to have issues with video. I get emails from people from time to time. Since my video stops after 7 or 8 seconds, and I have this little temperature gauge on the side of my camera that's on the side of the LCD. It's not a temperature gauge, it's a buffer gauge, and it's telling you that the card can't keep up with the writing from the camera, and it's going to stop. I haven't seen an issue where it doesn't play it back smoothly. Maybe if you're trying to play it off the card or off the camera on the computer, that's going to cause you some issues. But once you move the file over to your computer, it should play just fine. And it should play back on the camera fine as well, as long as it recorded fine. But yes, a slow card will affect your video and how fast you can record it, or how high of a quality, and whether or not it will run out and give you buffer overruns before you record all of your video. And so how many times can you reuse? That's one of those things where don't worry about it. More times than you probably will ever use that card, and I'm including ourselves in that when we're using cards every weekend, multiple times a week. So the life of these cards is very good. I've even put cards through the wash. That's a separate thing, but I don't recommend it, but they've worked afterwards too. Ahmed Adia has a question about what are the best photography contests, not in terms of prizes, but in terms of best competition with professional photographers. Probably should have skipped this question because I've got no idea. But I wanted to share a couple of things about photography contests. There are a bajillion photography contests out there. There are a lot of very serious ones, National Geographic, World Press.
There's PPA and there's WPPI, which are the Professional Photographers Associations that have...
And the wedding professional photography industry?
That's WPPI, yeah. Right, okay, so we're talking about the acronyms.
Well, you said yes.
Right, but I'm just saying in general, they're wedding or their photographers associations where they have contests, they sponsor photo contests, then they have a panel that judges your images and critiques your images. Very similar, well, probably a lot more critically than the way that we do it. But, yeah, I mean, PPA, you have to be a member. I think it's like, $30 a month or something if you're doing this professionally. It's a small cost of business. WPPI is a little bit more expensive. I think you have to attend in order to be eligible to submit. But there's also Fearless Photographers, and they're mostly wedding photography, but they do a roundup of, I don't know if they do it biannually or quarterly, but they do a roundup of the best wedding images they've seen, so sort of a competition too.
Look, even though we didn't have, that was helpful stuff, even though I don't really have much help with that, I would say that there are tons of photography contests out there. You have to be very careful about entering because, one, there's usually a fee. Two, on some of the slimier ones, you give up all rights to your photo when you enter that. That's not a good contest. The good contest, you're not giving up your rights.
Right.
And three, oftentimes they'll come back and say, you've won, pay us, and we'll send you the book that your image is in, or things like that.
Yeah.
And so you end up paying them a lot of money, and it's not really clear whether or not you actually won, or you just funded this photography book that your image happens to be in, which can be a very cool thing. There are some ones like that, but just be careful.
Yeah, I think, if you're going to you're going to submit an image to be into a contest, then, there should be judging. Like, you should be learning from the experience. The image should be critiqued, and you should have some helpful information to, coming out of it, so.
Okay, good. Let's go. I'm realizing there's lots of questions, and we've been blabbing a lot already.
Yeah.
All right, David Dancer has a question. How can he tell what the native resolution of his photo is?
I don't know. Do you know?
Well, if you download the photo to the native resolution is when you take it on, let's say it's large size, and it's in the manual. It will tell you that this image is 4,322 pixels by blah blah blah.
Right. I thought.
When you bring it into Lightroom, over on the right in the whole metadata, it will tell you your resolution.
Yeah. But when it'll tell you on the back of the camera too, won't it?
I don't think it does tell you on the back of the camera.
I feel like it does. Or somewhere in the camera, I feel like it tells you.
I took a card out of here. Well,
you can still look at the menu, though. I think if you look at the menu.
You look at the menu.
Okay.
Why? The follow-up question is, when exporting out of Lightroom or Photoshop for web presentations, which resolution should I set my photos to export at?
Yeah, see, when you set it to RAW, it tells you the file size, the dimensions.
Oh, it does, yeah.
And when you set it to medium RAW, it tells you, and then same with
you're
large.
Right. Hand me the T5i. Yeah. Should tell you on the back of the camera when you select that file size. So the large JPEGs, it would be the same for RAW. Your dimensions doesn't change at the highest setting, is 5,184 by 3,456. And that gets you your 18 megapixels.
Yep.
All right. And you can change your size. Now, if you're exporting for a display on the web, what resolution should you change to?
Oh, it depends where you're displaying it.
Well, let's say on the web in general. 640 by 480.
That's really small.
That is pretty small.
I usually, when I'm exporting something for the web, even for Facebook, even though I know that anybody can download it, I do the length of the image is no smaller than 1,080 pixels.
1,080.
And that kind of fills up my screen, which is pretty big. It's not like a Retina display, but it's fairly large screen, so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is always going to change, so.
Right. And hopefully you are using some type of program like WordPress or Squarespace that is automatically going to take a large resolution image and create multiple smaller resolution copies for you and allow you to share those and say whether or not they should come up for a mobile device or full screen or all that stuff as well. So, and for Facebook, let's see, David, you didn't ask for Facebook, you just said web, but You said for Facebook, yours the longest dimension for you is 1080.
Yeah. Well,
I thought we had read that
it's
like 2200 was.
No, I don't do that. I don't. No, it's like 1280, 1080.
Okay.
That's as big as I go.
For my Facebook images, I do 22 or 2400 pixels long on a side. I've heard that that is the best setting to battle Facebook's compression.
I think you're just supposed to export it at the maximum resolution, so without actually compressing the quality of the image. So, yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I feel like nobody really knows for sure.
That might be true. Somebody knows for sure.
Somebody, but not
Mark
anybody
does.
that can help us.
Okay. Dale Harrison has a question about running into aliasing and moire issues. I wonder if we're running into moire issues with your sweater. When shooting video, he has the T5i and the 70D, and both cameras seem to have issues with it. Seems to be really bad when shooting video outside. What recommendations do you have about this? Well, Dale, in my testing, I did find that the 70D and T5i, it's pretty easy to make them have some issues with moire. For those who aren't sure what moire is, it is this kind of optical illusion, wavy pattern you get in finely repeating fabrics, screens. I'm pointing to baskets that I've used in tests before, tiled roof. It really depends a lot on the kind of the repeating nature of something that's in your shot. Now, Nikon does do a better job of controlling for this. This is one area where I really do see Nikon being much better. But a couple things you can do. One, seems a little silly, but you could actually defocus just a tiny bit. Or shoot at those shallow apertures, more shallow apertures, so that your subject, hopefully that's not where your moire is isolated from background where you might be seeing moire, but it's all soft and out of focus so you don't see it. And then there are plugins as well. So if you're editing in Final Cut or Adobe Premiere, there are some plugins that will basically do kind of a slight Gaussian blur back there and will soften those things out. The best thing to do is kind of shoot in such a way that you're trying to avoid that. I hope that it's possible for you, but it sounds like from your question you're running into this fairly often, so you might want to look at those plugins. Okay, great. Thank you, Dale. Melinda would like to know how we keep our equipment safe when traveling. What do you do when you stay in motels, hotels, etc.?
Well, we have a couple of think tank airport security bags. He has a backpack, and I have a rolling bag, and that's where I carry all of my photography gear. So pretty much everything that I ever take to a wedding, save maybe like some light stands and a couple other things, fit in that rolling bag. So if I need to take all of my stuff somewhere when I'm traveling, I can fit it all in there. And that's pretty safe. I will not separate from that bag ever. If they told me as we were boarding that there was no more room in the cabin, as has happened once before.
I think we just talked about this last week.
Yeah. I just put my foot down and I am like, well, I'm either going to get on my petite foot down and tell them that I will either get on the next plane or they better find some space for me in that cabin because I'm carrying a bag that has a lot of money.
Your livelihood.
Worth. In my livelihood, right. In photography gear. So I'm not going to risk that for anything. And I've never had any issues at hotels or anything. I've never felt like I've been, like unsafe for anything. Mm-hmm. I would say if you're, make sure that the room has a safe. There's lots of places where the rooms have safes. So just make sure it has a safe. Keep it in your car. I mean,
in the trunk.
Yeah.
Locked trunk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the safes in hotel rooms are often quite small, and so you don't have a room for all of your gear. But, for us, we usually have our gear with us when we're not in the hotel room, and so we haven't had to worry about that a ton.
So just keep your gear in your mind, stay close to it, and be careful. And insure it. I mean, if this is your livelihood, you should insure it and prepare for the worst. So that kind of gives you a peace of mind, and you can you know, obviously you're not just going to let it out and be, you know, wherever, but...
Have a sign that says steal me.
Right. But
It's not a good idea.
if something does happen and you've taken all the precautions to avoid it, but still inevitably happens, then, you know, you have a backup and you don't have to spend a lot of money out of pocket. So insuring your gear is a good idea.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Melinda. Melinda's traveling to Utah soon for some meteor shower pictures.
Ooh, that sounds really cool.
It does sound cool. Renee Baudouin. Oh, I said that really poorly. Baudouin?
I'm not sure.
Okay. It's Canadian.
We're sorry.
I'm sorry,
your
Renee.
Names.
Renee says hello from Canada. Hello, Canada. We're not very far from Canada. I have purchased a Canon macro lens, the 100mm f2.8L.
Ooh, that's on my list.
That's the gold standard macro lens for Canon. I understand that it's one of the top of the line in macro lenses. You're right. My question is, would you or wouldn't you add extension tubes to this macro? Better yet, is it possible to add extension tubes to this macro?
What are you trying to magnify?
I thank you in advance for any advice you can answer on this question. And to the best of us both.
Are you trying to take a micro shot of something?
Well, let's talk about what extension tubes are. And I prepared for this question.
Oh,
Not
great.
like I prepared for the other question about the resolutions.
Now what's the difference between an extension tube that actually has a lens in it and these? Are they called something else?
What's an extension tube with a lens? Oh, they're just better. So these are extension tubes. And basically, they think of them as spacers that go between the lens and the camera. And by doing that, you are changing the focal length and something else more complicated than I can explain well. And basically, you are effectively increasing the magnification. We use these from time to time, even in the wedding business. We have used them to take more macro style shots without having a macro lens. Now these suckers were about $12. They're cheap. They're basically just pieces of metal. One that hooks onto your camera, and two that hooks onto the lens and increases that distance.
A few words about these though. If you're doing this professionally, you probably should just get a macro to avoid yourself the trouble. You have to manually sort of tweak your aperture before you take the lens off of the camera, and set your aperture manually by holding down the aperture preview button. And it cuts down on some light as well, so you'll lose some light. You have to make sure that the place where you're shooting is actually really, really bright. And they're not really you're very shaky, so it's going to take a lot of tries to actually get the macro shot that you want. So I wouldn't put any extender tubes on the macro unless you're trying to get like super close, like get a magnification that is like almost like a microscope, you know?
Right. And if you're if you're trying to get that close, you might want to consider that specialized macro that Canon sells. But you're going to lose aperture control. So as Christina said, you're going to have to do the depth of field preview and then do the trick where you unlock it while you're holding down the depth of field preview button to keep your aperture. Then you're not going to be able to change it. You're going to lose image stabilization. Unless you're doing the really nice macro tubes that pass power through.
Right.
We're not familiar with those. We haven't used them.
Yeah.
And you're also going to lose focus. You're going to have to manually focus, or I should say you're going to lose autofocus. So first off, I would try shooting with just the 100 and see if it'll get close enough for you, especially with a little bit of cropping, as I've talked about. It is a nice lens, and you should be able to crop some before you really start to lose some quality there, depending on what you're trying to capture and what your end product is going to be. And if that doesn't work for you, then certainly you can try these. But if you're trying to take pictures of anything like a bug, and you have to do the manual focus and plus be on a tripod because you've lost image stabilization and have tons of light, it's not going to work very well for you. So
unless it's a dead bug.
So unless it's a dead bug. Which people do take pictures of, because people take pictures of dead bugs.
Yep.
Don't have anything else to say. So, here you go, Renee. Thank you for that question. Daniel wants to know in terms of Daniel Kohler.
Collier, I think.
Collier. We probably have pronounced everybody's last name completely wrong. I'm sorry. That's okay. I just said it's okay. In terms of composition, what do you look for when you're shooting street photography?
Well, this is really interesting because in street photography, you have to really take into account the architecture that you're framing your subjects around and use it to frame your subjects around it. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on the situation, but, you know, just kind of use the lines in the architecture and like the lines on the road and in buildings and stuff to kind of frame your subjects and to lead to the action. And yeah, that would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. My advice is simpler. The same kind of composition that you would look for when shooting any type of photograph. But is that just maybe it's a cheap way, and what you said was a little more helpful. Because, you know, your rule of thirds you still want to use, your leading lines, which you said specifically using the buildings.
But there's different elements, you know. You're not working with somebody who's sitting still. You're sort of anticipating a moment, and you have to take into consideration your environment, which is, I mean, you would have to do that with any type of photography, but with street photography, you have a little bit less control. So, yeah, I mean, the lines in buildings and
you mentioned framing. I think that's something that I think is beginners to photography often don't think about. They're looking at their subject, they're focused on their subject, and they're not looking at how their subject is framed naturally or unnaturally, and what they could do, where they could move to maybe frame them better, and remove intersections from the back of their head. Like right now, this monitor is going right through the back of my head. It's a little annoying.
And I have a monitor coming out of my head.
And you have a monitor coming out of your head. Who set this shot up? So you want to think about those things when you're photographing on the street or off the street.
Yep.
In the woods.
Sure.
Watch out for those branches coming out of people's heads.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one.
That's a big one. All right. Thank you, Daniel. David wants to know about uploading to Instagram. What's the best way to upload to Instagram at the 1:1 ratio? Should do full size, which she's been, or the way I've been doing, which is full size but with a white border around the picture.
I'm not sure.
It's a very personal, I think, opinion. But so basically, should you crop your image to be 1:1, or should you put it up there with white borders to give you your full aspect ratio?
Oh, yeah. I think that's based on, it's different from picture to picture. Like, I don't really want to, I've photographed a photo, you know, an image with my camera in a native aspect ratio, and I don't want to crop it into a square format, and so I don't. But it varies. It's different from picture to picture. Some pictures can be cropped to be square, some really shouldn't. So just, you know, kind of play around with it and see what you like.
Yeah. See what you like. The reason I got this out is because this is my Instagram camera, the 70D, because of the Wi-Fi mostly. And you can set it so that your aspect ratio is 1:1, and on the back right now you can see that it's 1:1 back there. That's just too dark so you can't really see. But what's funny about this is because I'm shooting raw, that aspect ratio is ignored, and so when those images come back over to my phone, where I prepare them for upload to Instagram, there you go, you can see that it's 1:1. They are 3:2. They're back to that normal ratio. So then I have to crop. But what this allows me to do is to frame with the idea of the 1:1. So that's why I do it that way. Another thing, though, to realize, I could shoot JPEG and then they would come over square, but I shoot RAW, and your aspect ratio is ignored when you shoot RAW. Another thing is whatever aspect ratio you choose is ignored if you're shooting through the viewfinder. It's only paid attention to, it's only used if you're shooting JPEG and you're shooting through or using the LCD. So keep that in mind when you're shooting for Instagram. Thank you, David.
Michael Kahn. Any tips on how to get good candids of kids? They move quickly and sometimes either freeze or the opposite, act out when they see me break out the camera. kids are tricky. They do move really fast.
Tricky little buggers.
Yeah, and you just kind of have to bribe them if you really want a good picture. I think that's the bottom line. Yeah.
Tip 1. Yep, don't be afraid to bribe. Tip 2, now I don't know if these are your kids, your grandkids, or if you're shooting professionally, kids. One of the things that I often will do with kids is I will, kind of put the camera down at my side and talk to them for a minute, so they know I'm a human being, and just kind of get them talking to me.
Yeah.
And then,
you have to
kind of
establish
during
a
that conversation, I might just bring the camera up and take a picture. Or depending on their age, I might say, "Can I take a picture of you now?"
Yeah, and then show it to them afterwards. They love to see themselves in the camera, a picture of themselves. In my experience.
And I was just thinking as I gave that tip, well, what if they say no? I've never had a kid say no. They always, they may not give an answer, or which is good enough
sometimes
if it's my job to
say
take their
no,
picture.
or sometimes they're just really grouchy. You just kind of have to. You have to do what you have to play by their rules and do what they want. You know, if they want it. So.
Yeah, and the bribing works.
Yeah.
And then I oftentimes ask with little ones is, do you see something in there? Sometimes there's a little birdie in there, and they get them to look right in there. And, again, depending on their age, some think that's silly because they know there's no birdie in there, but an adult's telling them there is, so they look. I don't know if I should feel guilty about that. Another thing is, yes, they're moving quickly. Center focus point, so you know what you're focusing on. Fire off a burst of pictures. Servo mode, which is where the camera is going to continually keep something moving in focus, which is the promise of servo mode. Doesn't always work out so well, but
it's better than one shot.
It's better than one shot. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you,
Michael Kahn.
Michael. All right.
Ahmed asks, how to get sharp images with night shooting, and is increasing the f-stop to 22 or above a good practice? Ask some friends advice to do so.
Bad friends. Bad. Now there might be a typo there. Maybe they said f2.2 and you left out the period, Ahmed, or they meant f2.2. But f22 is a very small aperture. It's not going to let in much light. And night shooting, you need to be able to let in as much light as possible, especially if you want to do handheld night shooting. If you got a tripod, then you can do these smaller apertures. But even, very rarely, you need to have a specific reason really ever to go above f11. Everything is going to be in focus and sharp with f11. Some generalizations here, but I feel safe enough in making that statement. But for night shooting, you want to open up your aperture as wide as a lens will let you. And so this is another place where prime lenses are wonderful. Put this 50 f1.4 without extension tubes on your camera and open it up to f1.4 or f1.8 or f2.
Won't that create a soft image though? Won't your image will be soft? Or won't your image be soft? So shouldn't you be pretty conservative and keep it at f4?
Okay, that's true. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're walking a balance line between sharpness and letting in light and how long you can stand around with your camera on a tripod or handheld. Really huge differences here if we're talking about putting the camera on a tripod or holding it. But basically, yeah, that would have been a better thing to say. f4, f5.6 is going to give you quite sharp images. You don't need to go way, way, way up. And still let in enough light that you probably can keep your shutter speed fast enough to handhold. But let's answer the question of the best way to get sharp night shots is to put your camera on a tripod, use mirror lockup, and shoot it like f8, f9. That's going to give you very sharp images. Nothing can be moving though, or it'll be blurry. Cars, people walking, and that can be okay. That can be a cool shot. But your buildings, your lights, all of that is going to be very crisp, very sharp. And, let your shutter speed be however long it needs to be for a proper exposure for that. So, tripod. And then do all of those things that keep the camera from vibrating and mirror lockup and all that stuff. And give you, Don't go above f11, 14 really, because then you also start to get diffraction, where that really small aperture actually can cause some softness in your image. And so watch my video where I talk about the sweet spot to get a little bit more information about that. Okay, all right, Ahmed. If any of you want follow-up or you want to add your thoughts on these answers, again, as we said at the beginning, this is our opinions, and I love it when you all share your helpful information and tips and thoughts, and sometimes some of you say, well, no, what I think they really were asking was this, and I read it and go, oh, you were right. That's probably what they're asking. So we love to hear that stuff from you. Thank you so much for all of these questions. Hope you found this useful. We'll do another one of these at some point in the future. Next week, we'll probably be back to our regular. Oh, we're going to pick our favorite images of the week.
We'll post them at the end.
We don't want to talk about them at all?
No, I think we should.
Oh, we'll post our two favorite images from the Flickr group at the end. Keep watching. And if you're watching this and you haven't already subscribed, I've said this before, but if you aren't already subscribed, you might not have seen it. Please subscribe. That's very powerful, and it is a easy way to thank us for taking our time to make videos like this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Here are our favorite images of the week from the Flickr group. All right, Michael Kahn wants to know if we have any tips on getting good pictures of candids. They move quickly, and sometimes they either...
Of candids? Good pictures of candids?
Good pictures of candids. Let's try that again. Michael Kahn wants to know if we have any good tips on getting... is very small. You have closed your aperture way down. And what little light there is when you're night shooting is not going to be making it... That was obscene. Not going to be...
Ugh. Sorry.
Not without an incredibly long shutter speed.
I'm sorry. It's just like innuendo in my brain now.